So, good evening, dear participants. We will welcome to the third day of the International Faculty Development Program. Without taking much time, let us start the event. Let me invite Dr. Vasudevan sir of IIDM to welcome the gathering.
Good evening to one and all. Thank you, Mr. Bennett, sir. Thank you for your good opportunity. So, first of all, we have to convey our sincere thanks to you only. So, you are the one who has created this wonderful faculty development program, international program, very nice manner and very successful manner. And yesterday program was very excellent. I'm really amazed for the yesterday program. So I'm without taking much time, I welcome each and everyone who has participated today, and particularly admin people, principal of Southfield College, Bishal sir, and other faculty members of Southfield College, and Dr. Bennett sir, Tivagar, all our host and co-host team, and those who are also participating, researchers, academician, postgraduate student, doctorate student, doctor scholar, our technical team and social media team. I welcome, my heartfelt welcome to each and everyone. Though it was a Good Friday holiday, most of the participants already asked. Some of them we are not able to join. What we can do? So our Bennett sir has already replied that we can share the YouTube link, and what was addressed in the today's meeting will be recorded and shared with each and everyone. So don't worry about that. Those who are not joined today, but those who are joined, I once again welcome you all for a third day program of today. I request all the participants, please mute your audio whenever you are free, because sometimes it's disturbing also. So whenever you are listening, unmute it, and when you are want to talk to it, and unmute your phone. Thank you. With that, I conclude my welcome address. Over to you, Dr. Bennett, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for welcoming the guest. Even I also felt the same. Today is Good Friday, so people will come or not. Apart from Good Friday, it's a holiday. So it's a 3 days holiday. I thought people come or not, but the attendance shows more than 100 participants. And this shows how much you people are really interested in the path of research. So thank you so much. And now I have to welcome the resource person of the day. Let me invite Mr. Prashanta Gurrank, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, Southfield College, Darjeeling, to introduce the chief guest to the forum. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Doctor. Good evening. It is my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker for day 3 of the 15-day faculty development program on research methodology, Dr. Thombina Gangmai. Dr. Thombina Gangmai Grace is an assistant professor of sociology at Lady Shri Ram College for Women, University of Delhi, with over a decade of teaching and research experience. Her academic interests include religion and society, social inequalities, gender studies, sociological research methods, environmental studies, sociology of contemporary India, sociology of work, sociology of sports. Doctor holds a PhD in sociology, specializing in ethnographic research on religious transformations, modernity, and social change. A dedicated scholar, Dr. Gangmai has published extensively in peer-reviewed journals and edited volumes, critically examining socio-cultural dynamics and transformations. She has played a key role in curriculum development, contributing to undergraduate sociology course design under the National Education Policy of India 2020. Beyond academia, she serves as a manuscript reviewer for Sage Publications and associate editor for interdisciplinary academic journals and a content developer for IGNOU study materials. Actively engaged in research mentorship and academic leadership, she has led field studies, organized career-oriented programs, and facilitated co-curricular and extracurricular activities. She has also participated in faculty development programs and academic initiatives that enhance pedagogical and research excellence. Her work bridges rigorous sociological and lived experiences, offering critical insights into contemporary social transformations. Dr. Grace is going to speak on the topic comparative analysis of qualitative and quantitative approaches. She brings with her a wealth of knowledge and expertise in the field, and we are honored to have her share her insights and guide us through today's session. Without further ado, I would now like to request Dr. Bennett Rajadurai to take over the proceedings. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much for introducing the chief guest to the forum. Even I also need to thank because when I was approaching her, I know that she is a busy faculty in the sociology domain. But when I asked her without any hesitations, she told me, yes, Bennett sir, I can come. And even though it's a holiday, I thought she won't give the dates. But anyway, she came to us, and today we'll be having a beautiful session. Dear participants, and we are not organizing the show only for the show purpose, it is for the education purpose. So we have taken huge amount of initiative and we have prepared the syllabus first. It's not about the event. We have prepared the syllabus first, and based on the syllabus only, we have taken the resource percent. So that much level we have struggled. But anyway, we are doing justice for what is about the topic is about. So without taking much time, let me hand over the session to resource person, Gangmai Grace, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much to the organizing committee for your generous words. And I'm deeply honored to be here. I think without wasting much time, we should begin. Bennett sir, if you could just, because of some technical issues, I'm not able to share my screen. So if there's a possibility of sharing that PPT, I would be grateful to you.
Yes, ma'am, we are doing, ma'am. We are doing, ma'am. Allow me a moment. You just
All right.
speak, ma'am. I will do in 2 to 3 minutes, ma'am.
All right. So to begin with, today's session, we will be focusing on a very significant theme, which I would like to put it in this way: studying society, 2 lenses and 1 world. Here I'm going to discuss about 2 important dimensions or the approaches to social research, that is quantitative and qualitative research. Now, we often wonder as to what exactly is research or social research. Now, coming to this aspect of understanding what is research, but the very first thing that comes to my mind, or that comes to our mind, is what am I looking for? Or what exactly is research? What is this all about? So so to briefly put it in terms of understanding what research is all about, it is a systematic investigation to discover new knowledge or deepen understanding of the social reality. So this involves asking questions, collecting data, analyzing informations. Why do we do this? All these tasks of asking, collecting, analyzing, it do help us explain or estimate or understand social phenomena. So driven by either curiosity or driven by some of the problems that we encounter in our lives, or that we see someone suffering, or the literature that we have come across, when we analyze it, we find some gaps. All this resulted in a quest for something more. So it can be theoretical or it can be empirical. So coming to the core foundation of research, there are 2 key philosophical pillars. One is the epistemology That means, what is knowledge? How do we know what we know? And the second pillar of research is methodology. So how do we find out? What tools and strategies do we use? So these are the two pillars that quite often is going to confront if anybody wants to know more about the social world that we live in. So now the question comes, when we study society, what exactly are we looking for? So now there are two things that one could, ask. The first question could be, is it the numbers that tell us how many people behave in a certain way that we are interested to know about it? Or the second question could be, am I interested to know the stories that explain why they behave that way? So it could be either of this that we choose it to enter the social world when we have a desire to know more about what's happening. Now, coming specifically to the two key approaches in social research, these are quantitative and qualitative. Trying to understand what quantitative research is, it focuses on the patterns, statistics, measurable variables, in short. And to briefly put it, what is qualitative research? It focuses the context, lived experiences, and in-depth investigation of it. So now the question that could come to our mind is this: are these two approaches opposite or complementary? So going through this, I'm sure by the end of this session, you will have the answer for yourself. The philosophical foundation of these two important approaches now could be discussed in this way. The first one, called quantitative, it stems from positivism. What exactly is positivism? This school of thought views that reality is seen as objective and measurable. So the two things that could be, quite often been focused by this school of thought is objective and measurable. And the other aspect that could be focused here is that they see knowledge as something that can be tested, verified, and generalized. Therefore, the researchers are seen as detached and neutral. And for this, it is advised to use tools to ensure reliability and validity. Now, coming to the second aspect, approaches called qualitative, it is rooted in interpretism and constructivism. And these traditions emphasizes something different from what I have just explained. So they see reality as socially constructed rather than objective and measurable. They give importance to context, the meaning, and lived experiences. And the role of researcher here is quite subjective, and who is often embedded in the social process. Now, one may like to know as to what are the views of scholars on these two important approaches. Now, there are competing views on these two approaches when it comes to understanding an application of this in social life. Quantitative and qualitative research are sometimes seen as competing paradigms, representing divergent epistemological questions, for example, like exploring the nature, sources, limit, and validity of knowledge. It concerns with what counts as valid knowledge about the social world. In contrast to this view, we also have a school of thought wherein scholars quite strongly feel that it is quite complementary rather than competing it. So these scholars often view these approaches as something different. Definitely they are different, but complementary. So then who does make use of this, or who can make use of this, and how to implement this? Now, each of these paradigm will be suited to different kinds of research questions that one asks as we begin to explore the social world. And it can be integrated within a single study, and here comes the emergence of mixed method. Understanding the approaches of qualitative and quantitative as data collection techniques. So I have given you two important aspects of it, the epistemological and the methodological. So these two approaches are seen as data collection techniques. From this perspective, they're technical methods for gathering data. But how do we choose this? Which is the right technique or the method? And what type of topic demands such kind of approaches? Now, the choices of this depends on three important aspects. Number one is, depending on the nature of the research problem that one chooses. Second, the type of data needed. And the third one is the research goals that one has set. So after analyzing these three important aspects, the nature of the research problem, the type of data needed, and the research goals that I have set forth, I will definitely choose for one of those or either both of this based on the pragmatic requirements that is quite, relevant to this particular theme. Now, understanding the nature of quantitative research, it involves systematic, structured data collection and analysis. Now, what does it seek to provide? It is intended to bring about quantifiable and generalizable findings. And it emphasizes on objectivity, measurement, and statistical reasoning. So inspired by the scientific method, it focuses on variables, control, measurement, and experiment. So in this process, you'll find that the key method that is quite, relevant to this is the survey. So this method generates data from large representative population. And it is specifically designed to test theories and hypotheses. For example, you can look at the relevance of national surveys on education, health, etc. So along with this survey method, there are other core methods that is used in the quantitative research process. That is experiments, that is controlled setting to test causal relationships. And the secondary data analysis, that is use of existing data, the census record, the official statistics maintained in different, libraries and offices. I think the perfect example that we can look at here is taking the classic case of Durkheim, was done a wonderful work of understanding what is suicide and what are the types of suicide and what are the factors or conditions that led people to commit suicide, that he published in the year 1952. So structured observation is very much the core aspect of this approach. The researcher records behavior using predefined scheduled. Data is quantified and analyzed, and it is quite useful in studying interaction pattern. So the example of this, scholars have made use of this method. Flanders, 1970, when she studies the teacher-pupil interaction. Blow, in 1955, consultation and bureaucracy, when he did the work, he made use of this method. So apart from this, we also have these other aspects very much core to this approach is the content analysis. Quantitative analysis of media content, for example, like referring to the online mediums of media or newspapers content or anything that has come about in terms of conveying any kind of information through television and so on. So it measures frequency, and understands the presence and co-occurrence of specific elements. And to cite example of this, we can look at the work of Beresford, 1980, Media as a Source of Data, where he uses, he was one of the scholars who made use of this method and content analysis to do his research. Now, the other aspects that is very much central to this approach called quantitative is language and logic that becomes very integral to this process. So usages of specialized scientific language becomes mandatory or becomes very, very important. So concepts are defined in measurable terms, for example, like in academic performances, one might use the word called CGPA, SGPA, or when it comes to understanding, making use of this quantitative data, one might come across the word called independent variable, control variables, calculating mean, standard deviation, regression, probability, p-value, so on and so forth. So all these are the specialized or very, very specific scientific language that is used in this approach. This is quite similar to the natural sciences methods applied in terms of how certain concepts and languages are being defined and read to be quite specific to a particular situation. So it requires rigorous design and conceptual clarity. So making use of if anyone intends to make use of this method or the approach called quantitative, it must be very well thought out in terms of the concepts that one has to use it if one has to bring about that end result called the findings of reliability and validity. Coming to the epistemological foundations, it is rooted in positivism. That means they believe in applying the scientific method to all of this knowledge. And it demands clear criteria for valid knowledge, that it should be measurable, should be rendered observable, and so on. But one must remember that numbers alone are not enough. One must meet standards of reliability, validity, and logic. So one must not simply choose this because this is the more convenient way of conducting data. But we must also ensure that we meet the standard of reliability and validity. Now the question comes as to what then is positivism supposed to comprise? Now it is a belief, as we all know, that positivism is a belief in applying natural science method to social science. That means we assume that social phenomena can be studied using observation and measurement. And it also treats our respondents, people, their emotions, their thought, the uniqueness, the differences as valid subjects for scientific inquiry. So the observable phenomena is treated as valid knowledge, according to this school of thought. So anything that is unobservable is excluded. And here the tools and instruments may assist or add in indirect observation. Now, knowledge through the verified facts. Now, one may like to know about how is this to be understood? Now, positivism emphasizes accumulation of verified facts. The importance given to this is the facts that is verifiable. So the scientific knowledge is built through rigorous evidence-based observation. And the goal of this is to explain and predict patterns of behavior in a value-neutral and in a very objective way. So then positivism and quantitative research is now to be understood in this lens, that quantitative research follows a logical and linear structure. Theories lead to hypotheses about the causal relationships, and concepts are operationalized for measurable observation. And importantly, findings are used to confirm, refine, or reject theories. So one may understand here, in this case, that the central or the key features or characteristics of this approach is that they focus on objectivity and measurable evidences. They emphasize on rendering abstract concepts observable, and they also focus on scientific and rational inquiry. Now, I have also added a few of these preoccupations in quantitative research. I would like to share a few of those, and here it focuses on concepts and the measurement. The aim is to make abstract concepts observable and measurable. It also investigates associations and causal processes between variables. Now, another preoccupation of quantitative research is to break down the social world. The concepts are reduced to measurable categories, for example, like social classes, racial prejudice, religiosities, etc. Research often builds on existing literature, not just formal theory. So now, then what is the role of literature review? What is the role of literature? How does it help any researchers when they start embarking on this journey of research? Literature review in this process factored as a foundation for constructing hypotheses. And this hypothesis stems from empirical evidences, and it also supports operationalization and conceptual clarity. So now the question that could be quite central to this is reliability in measurement when it comes to the application of quantitative approaches or the method. Now, reliability is one of the central aspects of this approach. Consistency of a measure is what I mean by reliability. What we measure, what we find out should be consistent. A key concern in ensuring validity, repeatable results in quantitative research is still something that we have to, that is still an ongoing discourse. How can we ensure? So the causality in quantitative research, here it focuses on establishing the causal relationships between concepts. So one of the chief goals of the scientists is to explain why things are the way they are. And these research aims to develop causal propositions supported by data and logic. So you'll find some of the scholars like Barbier, Davis, in the 1970s and 1980s, they have done made use of this quantitative research, and they have explained as to why things are the way they are, and how does it help develop the causal propositions between these two variables. All this have been quite central in the work. Internal validity and experimental design. Now, this is in one of the elements of these processes. It aims to maximize internal validity, and the experimental research is depicted as a model of quantitative research due to its strength in internal validity. So the key to the causal inferences. Now we talk about quantitative, specifying, causal inferences, and in this process, I would like to take one example in terms of how this causal inferences could be understood. For example, since today is Good Friday, and I would like to take example of something related to the church. The relationship between church attendance and delinquency, the nature of people, the type of people, the age group of people, and the kind of action called participating in some sort of crime, in some sort of delinquency, a delinquent act. So when one attempts to know about these causal inferences, trying to understand whether age is an important variable to understand the linkage between the church attendance and the delinquency. Does it mean to say that the age group, specific age group has a relevance in terms of their good attendance or participation in the church activities that has lessened the type of unwanted actions that that they commit? Or is it something to do with other variables? So is it the age when one young person who is in the age group of below 30 goes to church less, in contrast to someone who is assuming that someone who is retired and has not much to do now, and or maybe in the age group of 50 plus, and trying to compare, is this age group a factor, a variable in terms of linking these two things in terms of church attendance and the nature of crime that one could see? So one could draw such kind of inferences by making use of these kind of approaches to understand the social problems of life. The main idea and the main intention of this is, or the main aspects of quantitative research is this called, one of the aspects called generalizability, the ability to generalize beyond the confines of the research location. Whatever the researcher has conducted research in one of these domains in their specific region or location or in a specific time period, can these have a bearing or relevance cutting across historical period, cutting across geographical barriers, cutting across these other differences in terms of religion, in terms of social cultural diversities? Can we understand some of these aspects while trying to make use of this as a model and try and look at the other societies where it is quite likely to be seen as something similar? Can it has a bearing on that beyond the confines of the research locations? Undoubtedly, there are challenges in quantitative research. Despite all of these strengths and the advantages that we have, one is that of replicability in quantitative research. Since the concept of replication is the hallmark of natural science, and this model is being brought into social sciences. And many of the scholars in the 1970s have used this model, this method. And many of them have felt that this replication, which is the hallmark of natural sciences, should also be a part of the social sciences domain. So the purpose of replication is to check the applicability of findings in other contexts. So by this, we can understand the significance of these results to help identify and control investigator bias. So whatever has been produced in one setting, and if that has some sort of relevance to understand someone who lives in another country, or someone who lives in a different geographical terrain in terms of the historical time, and if that can be applicable, then this is what we have to ensure, that it has its bearing, it has its own relevance. And the idea of this one is, since it has borrowed from natural sciences, it is being seen or viewed as quite objective approaches to understand the reality. If this is so important, then can we ensure that this will have definitely a bearing on the life of people who live outside that locale or geographical setting? Or if it doesn't bear that kind of answers, then why then it is so often regarded as important facets of the quantitative research traditions? If the research findings of making use of quantitative research in our specific domain cannot be applied in a different setting and bring out a result as it is in the case of natural science laboratory, then why is it so regarded important aspect of quantitative research traditions? So the answer is that the importance in quantitative research, although lies more in replicability, and then in replication itself. So read this replication and replicability in two important columns. So what we are trying to say here in quantitative research is not just the replication itself. More than this replication, we are emphasizing on the replicability. So replication means repeating research under the same condition, same set of people, same set of religion, same under the same kind of timing. But what we are concerned about is much more of, rather than replication, we are focusing more into the replicability. That means the ability to use the same instrument or the same kind of tools and techniques that designed to reproduce findings in different settings. So we are able to use the same instrument. We are able to use the same set of questions. We are able to use the same set of variables. And so why replicability matters? Because it ensures that research results can be checked and validated by others using the same or similar research tools. We often do it as the first phase of any research is literature review. So we check this to ensure that we get some idea in terms of what people have accomplished, what were the methods used, what were the limitations faced, what were the variables chosen, what were the questions asked, what were the categories have identified. And so all these are to ensure that the reliability, the replicability of this one. So specifically in the case of quantitative research, all these will bring about the relevance of this replicability than the replication itself. So the practical application to this is that a researcher should be able to use the same questionnaire with a comparable sample, even in a different locale, and still obtain similar results. So it is very, very close to positivism, and that comes from this natural science approach, that it is objective, it is controlled, it is measurable, and it is valid and reliable. Because we are able to make use of the same set of questionnaires with a comparable sample size, with this comparable set of categories of people, and although in a different locale, we are able to derive the similar kind of results. So every time you do it with the same set of questions, the kind of approaches, and one is able to derive a similar result, then that is what it means by replicability. So the importance of quantitative research traditions is that, as I just mentioned, is replicability. And this, in this process, it focuses on the individualism. So mark this as a significant point of departure from this qualitative. Quantitative research often treats the individual as a central unit for empirical inquiry. We can refer to the work of Bryan, 1985, who made use of this or have seen the relevance and importance of reading individual as a primary subject of study. This process make use of survey as one of the key instruments of it. So individuals are surveyed as discrete object of inquiry with responses aggregate to form overall measures of the sample. And there is no need for personal connection among these respondents that we have chosen for our study. There is no requirement for individuals to know each other, as long as the responses can be collectively analyzed. So there are potential limitations here. The list of preoccupations in quantitative research is not exhaustive. So what I have discussed so far about quantitative is not an exhaustive one, but this is something that is a part of that process that could be studied, analyzed, and used it to understand what is quantitative research. And so it means to say that not all researchers may fully identify with this individualistic approach. So you may find some variations, you may find some of these newer discourse emerging, some of these newer techniques and the kind of softwares. So all of these, even if we choose to make use of this quantitative method as one of the key instruments for our research, one may use one software, one may use the other one may choose one variable different from the other one. And all these, so one should not expect that all of these what I have mentioned just now should be religiously applied in each of these quantitative research, but rather depending on the nature, the type of data required, and the goals that has been set. All these are the key to understand as to what are the things that one must choose, and what are the steps that one has to religiously follow it when it comes to, pursuing your passion in terms of research that one is embarking on. So now, having discussed about the quantitative research, let me just take you to the next level of our discussion. That is the nature of qualitative research. As I mentioned earlier, there are two competing views. Some scholars view that these two approaches are quite distinct and different. Some of the scholars are strongly of the opinion that these are complementary. But we need to understand what exactly are the point of this meeting point and what are the aspects that could be seen in terms of a line of difference. Now, taking you to the historical roots in anthropology, trying to understand qualitative research, one must go back to this anthropological school of thought. And so the method of data collection called qualitative research or approach is closely associated with the anthropological school of thought, discipline called anthropology. And this method was applied by social scientists for many years. One of the best examples that one we could look at is the work of Malinowski, who advocated for researchers to immerse themselves in the community, not to be distant from, not to be seen or studied the people as our respondents from a distance, but to completely immerse themselves as a researcher in the community with a set of people whom he or she chooses to study. So the adoption of such research strategy was specifically advocated by Malinowski. So he himself is someone who has done a beautiful work of, making use of this method to understand the Robben Islanders. So this method called qualitative research approach can be seen or can be understood as the study of the social world that demands or that intends to describe and analyze the culture and behavior of the human and the groups from the point of view of those being studied. So it demands of the researcher to put themselves into the shoe of the person of the community that he or she has studied or is studying or has studied. So one has to put oneself into that kind of shoe. So that would demand much of these from the side of the researcher to take precautions in terms of how well this could be maintained and how well they can make use of these chances to learn more and to go in depth into the life of someone else. This method of data collection demands one of these is, what are the ways in which one could carry out such kind of task called entering into the life of the respondents or the people who we have chosen to study, and how do we handle such situations? One of the methods, or one of the aspects here, ways in which we could enter the life of these people here is through the participant observation. So we're seeing that interview, we talk to people, but the most important aspect of this qualitative research is the physical presence of the researcher in the field. A participant observation. There are also non-participant observance, but there are also situations where one has to participate. This method demands, a good rapport that one has to build as one, embarks in this journey called understanding and interpreting the life of the people. So this participant observation is one of the foundational method that involves sustained immersion to understand groups or organizations. It is not just about going to the place, interact with someone else for 2-3 hours, or being there for 1 week or so and come back and write about them. It is just the opposite. It is a constant presence of the person being there. So to be there, it demands a lot of skills. We need to have a good kind of, establish the entry point. Because not all this research topic would demand studying one's own
और
culture.
चल दे मैं अपनी इतना भी ला लेंगे है ना चल
There are also
कितनी
times
हो
when we have studying others' culture, which means we don't know the language. We don't know any of these people. Or sometimes when we pick up a topic, something that is quite new, something that we could not gather from the available literature, or exploring something new and entering into the life of the people, it demands a lot of these preparation. How to enter into the field, how to establish a good rapport, because we talk about participant observation, but this is not something that will come so suddenly. It takes a lot of skills on the part of a researcher to, be accepted and being granted this kind of privileges to be with them, because this method demands gathering the data in the natural setting, not to disturb the environment with the presence of the researcher, but to be accepted, but not to the extent of refining or modifying their lifestyles. It has to be in such a way that no matter whether the researcher is present there as an outsider, one has to be for that very moment, for that period, one has to be accepted as any one of these members from the locality or in that group, social group, in order to ensure that data is real, natural, and it is reliable. So it demands sometimes that you will be invited to partake in some of those festivals, rituals, or some ceremonies, and the researcher must be able to make himself or herself realize of the fact that this is not a simple kind of investigation, but you are also, showing that kind of involvement to not just show to the people that, you are conforming to the kind of norms, but in terms of trying to understand that one's participation in that should also help you understand the real emotions and feelings and the kind of pain, the kind of reality that a person undergoes should be felt through this participant observation. So it is this what I'm talking about, the kind of sustained immersion. It demands your time, it demands your complete involvement, but not losing the mindset that you are a researcher. And with the intention to learn more about the in-depth accounts of the group or the organization or the, that association that you intend to study. So the group of people, in short. So participant observation is one of the ways in which you could, enter into the lives of people to gather data under this approach called qualitative. Under this, we also have ethnography or ethnographic study. This entails a qualitative research method that is used to study culture, communities, and everyday practices by immersing oneself in the social setting that one has chosen. And the purpose of this is to understand the lived experience, the values, behaviors, and interactions of people from their own perspective. If you're interested, you may look at this article by Rossetto on from the door of my tent, from the door of his tent. So here it talks about the participation and the kind of a very good understanding about of a researcher about on the people that he has been with them for quite some time. So as you open the door and as you wake up every morning, since you have been in that society or the group or in that particular set of community for a quite long time, one is able to gain the kind of acceptance, familiarity, understanding, and values and behaviors and interactions. And every day you get up, you can understand what they meant. It is not from my perspective, but you are able to understand these behavior, the cry, the laughter, the joy, the rituals, the kind of rejection, the kind of acceptance, and the kind of choices they make it. So anything that they do is being read from their perspective. So that much of this involvement and immersion, one has to be there to understand the lived experiences of people from their own perspective. So this is one of the ways in which we enter and get the society and gather those data. So increasingly, this method is used in sociology, in anthropology, and now increasingly in other social sciences discipline. While one intends to, or when we recommend somebody to do a research, one of the aspects that we encourage them to do is go for such kind of detailed understanding of the study from their perspective, from the lived experience of the person who we study. And in this method, we quite often use this unstructured interviewing, since we intend to know from their perspective, and we can't know, or we are not having that kind of adequate knowledge about all of the things. We cannot be having a ready-made set of questions or very fixed type of questions or close-ended questions, which means to say yes or no, or to map the kind of the range of emotions and feelings and degree of the kind of the choices. We go with unstructured interview. We have a broad theme focusing on what one lays down as the central objectives of one's research. Based on that, one builds up a kind of unstructured interview. You have in mind as to broad themes and the broad aspects one has to cover. For instance, you have a few guide questions that will serve you as a kind of torch in the dark. So it is not necessary that even if one has a set of questions, it is not mandated to pull out one's diary and ask the questions serially. Those are only to help us understand that these are the broad themes, areas one has to cover. And this unstructured interview, provides a kind of minimal guidance. So what we usually do is, as you begin studying the people, your respondents, having identified the respondents and having identified the place, the people, the set of people you are going to study, probably this could be the kind of sample size. One begins with unstructured interview. And in this process, as I said, it doesn't demand specific, fixed, close-ended kind of questions. Therefore, it is kind of free-flowing, a kind of natural setting that allows someone to give the kind of narrative, the kind of data from his or her knowledge. So there is the researcher would give minimal guidance in terms of what you have to say, what you have not, why you should not say it. At the very outset, the researcher explains as to what are the aspects that you intend to hear from the person, ranging from, say, educational experiences, or maybe say your participation in religious, events, or your interest in political, aspects of it. So one gives a broad guideline, and we do not have a set of questions fixed. And even if I have a set of, questions in my mind, that this would definitely be the questions asked. When I interact with the respondents, I must be ready to understand as to what are the things that I need to incorporate to learn more about. Once the person shares or reveals those kind of narratives, one will be able to understand as to what are the limitations that I have as a researcher. So one should be open to read from their perspective. And even if the person says that this is not what it is, and even if I would like to say, no, it is not, then we refrain from doing it, and we refrain ourselves from giving the kind of instructions or strong instructions after every answer. Rather, we give a kind of free flow to ensure that the researcher or the respondents is able to give us the kind of rich data from his or her knowledge. And in the process, we gain so much in terms of incorporating many other things that we have not ever thought about it. So it allows participants significant freedom in their response. So we don't give a kind of range or scale. In the quantitative, we talk about the scalings: agree, disagree, or highly disagree, or if you like it, choose in the range of 1 to 10. So in the qualitative research, we never use this kind of scaling, but we are supposed to read every aspect of the life from their experience, the lived experience of the respondents from that particular setting. So significant freedom is being granted, and then making use of unstructured interview, that is minimal guidance or intervention from the researcher. So a comparison with structured interview, unlike the structured interviews, as I said, this approach encourages unstructured type of interaction. The questions and answers and the kind of limitations that we have given is something that we often refrain from. So instead of the interviewer asking a kind of specific scaling of the emotions or ranking it, interviewer would ask a very, very open and ended questions. So what is your experience about this? Or how do you feel about, or how is your experience of this kind? So we give the kind of questions to open up the kind of the past and reveal it in the form of their own narratives from that perspective. So instead of closing those kind of situations, we open up and letting the interaction between the respondents and these researcher flow that have a kind of very natural setting. So flexibility becomes very important. So the conversation is not about what is your name, what is your age, and what is your income. So we don't force the respondents. Rather, we understand them. In order to ensure that we get maximum or adequate data when we interact in their natural setting, the first task is to build up the rapport. So rapport building becomes very important. Learning the language becomes mandatory if we are in the new terrain and a new culture. At least we should try and learn the working knowledge of it to ensure that we are being accepted. And we also cannot rely on translator. So it is a duty of a researcher to learn the language, to be familiar with the kind of environment. So try and adapt to the situation. So flexibility becomes very important, not just on the part of the researcher giving the kind of questions more flexible, but in terms of the adaptability. So that would facilitate a deeper understanding, a better relationship established between the researcher and the people one has chosen to study. So this, in fact, produces or generates rich data. this method generates a kind of, through that open-ended questions, one derives immense information or data, and that lead us to incorporate many more things which we have missed out, especially in the case of those kind of researches that is exploratory. We do not know, we don't have adequate kind of literature to bank on. We don't know who's going to be a respondent. We only randomly or roughly calculated that this could be the person, and we have very limited access to it. So by being with the people and trying to learn more about this and being closer to them at a long stretch of time, one is able to understand and figure out as to who to talk to and how much to invest, and how to read here, in a sense, how to interpret the meaning of the kind of action. Why do they eat rice in the morning? Or why do they prefer such kind of preparation? Why do they like such kind of spices? Or why do they prepare the way that why do they prepare the kind of food in that manner? So we try to understand them by looking at this. And so when we asked them as to, could you tell me, how do you prepare this? Instead of asking a direct question as to, what are this, are these 1, 2, 3 spices you use it to prepare such kind of food item? We asked them as to what are the types of spices that we use it. So it allows them to enable them to give us the kind of adequate and true information about what they do in the natural setting. So richness of data is one of the strengths of this method. So the application of this one. So unstructured interviews are particularly useful in exploring complex behavior. So it is quite useful when it comes to understand complex behavior experiences, because it provides insights that structured methods that we often overlook or that we often don't know about it. So apart from this, ethnography, talk about this participant observation, the focus group interview, the flexibility of this interview process, data collection, the richness of the data that one could generate. There is also a diverse data collection method. So one could, in the process of living with them, one could generate many other methods and many other skills that one has to be very, very careful about in generating and applying to ensure that data and adequate data could be generated. And if surplus, we can also make use of this to help others who are going to join, as a social research scholar, in the coming years, to help them explore on those kind of themes, even if those themes are not relevant for us. Now, reflexibility and the coming to this aspect called, what are the other things that one could think about making use of this method? Now, reflexibility and the researcher bias. Since we study this social group, and the researcher himself or herself is very much a human being, there can be a possibility of the kind of subjectivity that enters into our research process, especially when it comes to data collection. And the second aspect is the subjectivity or the bias that one could quite often show when it comes to interpretation. This may not be read in terms of deliberate attempt, but quite often it could also be quite unintended, because you're human beings and we try and see that if they like those kind of things, we said, no, this is not what we like it. So one must be constantly being reminded of the fact that even if I have chosen to partake in those kind of ceremonies as a participant observation, as a non-participant observer, or being a researcher in the field, interacting with the community, with the family, or having a focus group, meeting or discussion, And no matter how familiar or how long is my stay in that particular setting, I must be reminded of the fact that I am a researcher coming to study this particular community society in their natural setting. So reflexibility is one that one must be taken care of, constantly being reminded of us as to who we are in that environment. Otherwise, this can be often, being read as very, very uncomfortable or inconvenient kind of, stay there. The use of interview and questionnaires may also enhance the scope and breadth of participant observation. So interview becomes mandatory. Interacting physical presence and interacting with the respondents in the natural habitat becomes very, very significant. So you drafted some sort of themes, questions that could be used while interacting with the respondents. So while some of the information gleaned from such interviews may be coded and presented as quantitative data, many qualitative researchers prefer to employ verbatim. Verbatim here in his or her word, quote unquote. So anyone who make use of this qualitative research methods might be quite inclined to go by this sort of interpretation in the data analysis, verbatim. That means in his or her word. Instead of quantifying, in the main chapter of our thesis, we talk about the data analysis. So all the data that one has gathered or collected from the field is now being organized, sort out, coded, themed, and now is subjected to interpretation. So in this process, it could also be made use of this coded and themes and the variables now, and all these emotions and feelings and rituals and ceremonies and activities that is being interpreted by the researchers, by the respondents to the researcher, is now being presented in the form of either a mixed type of thing called subjective interpretation or verbatim, and also could also be presented in the form, in some aspects, you can also be present in the form of quantitative data, for example, say in the form of flow chart, in the form of pie diagram, in the form of graph. So one could present in this way. So but quite often many of these qualitative researchers would be quite inclined to use some of these verbatim, that is in his or her own words, quote unquote. Expanding participation with interviews. Now, in this method, the participant observers may not be able to observe all relevant situations and processes. So despite the strength of this method, it is also not possible for every researcher to be religiously paying attention to everything that one is exposed to. So, but it requires intense and immense and extensive and intensive kind of involvement. But even if one has, performed according to my understanding as to my best in terms of my participation, in terms of my attention, in terms of my interest and involvement, there could be some sort of aspects that is still lagging behind. So I may not be able to observe everything. But to the best of my knowledge as to how much I could do it as a researcher, that is the task of any researcher applying the method of qualitative study. So that enhances the scope and breadth of the study. So although we are all subjective beings coming from our own different background, family, religion, from our own interests and our own limitations, the physical presence would help us generate and gather a number of data that would be quite rich. So a combination of interviews and questionnaires and then observation, then participation and non-participation of the kind would really enhance the scope and breadth of the study. So there are other variety of methods that is used in the data collection method, a process. So apart from participant observation, interview, and focus group discussion, then you talk about the participant and non-participant. Life history method is one of the qualitative research quite often used by some of the scholars. So which means now, what does this method entails? It demands involving or studying to help reconstruct the life of individuals using variety of varied data sources, for example, say by referring to the kind of personal diaries, autobiographies, and make them recollect by, interacting and, after having established a good rapport, one will be able to engage in much more deeper investigation, and the respondents will be in a position to at least reconnect and recall many of these tasks or activities or all the relevant dots to be connected by referring to this kind of by going through once again about the kind of the years that one has lived, the activities that one has carried out, and also being backed up by the kind of diaries, personal diaries, autobiographies that we have. So all these are the ways in which we could reconstruct the life of individuals. That is also known as life history method. So in this research method, it demands prolonged, unstructured interview between the researcher and the respondent. Respondent is the person who has chosen who have chosen to be our data provider. So sometimes you may intend to spend maybe say 1 hour, 2 hours. It might end up going for hours and hours, or it might require to come back next day or to fix another time to continue the kind of discourse. So it's a very prolonged kind of interaction. So in this process, one must be reminded of the kind of objectives and the requirement of the data that one has to be very, very clear about as to how much do you need it, and how adequate or inadequate do you find while interacting with your respondents. So you can prompt, you can if you feel that the respondents have given some sort of reply and you still need to say that although you can't tell them that no, that's not the thing that I wanted from you, but you can always say that, having listened to this, I would be happy to learn more about your, maybe say your active participation in that association 3 years ago, so something like that. So it demands a lot of this unstructured kind of interaction that prolong the kind of interaction between the two. So it may last for days and days, and it might demand a lot of many sittings together to complete the kind of, say, understanding about the life of the person. So this has been conducted by one of those important scholars, Louis, on the study of the Sanchez family in 1961. Very extensive interview with the family in a Mexican slum, and where he asked a number of questions about every aspect of their life, which he wanted to know about a person living in a slum, and in a Mexican slum, about the sex life, about the employment, about the joy, about the fear, about the hopes, about the dreams, memories, the pain, the success, the kind of justice, the kind of politics, the kind of religion, the kind of knowledge about the kind of world, the kind of suffering, the kind of a relationship, the kind of neighborhood, all the things that he wanted to know has been provided, but it demanded of him a very, very intensive and extensive kind of interaction with a set of respondents, with a single family. So this is what it talks about, the kind of how prepared one must be if one intends to take up qualitative research. And so what does this methodological approach provides in terms of the benefit? It encourages individuals to narrate their life stories comprehensively, rather than asking, what is your name, what is your age, what is your income, and how do you feel today? Are you happy? Are you quite happy about it? Instead of asking such kind of direct, short, and very close-ended, allow them to narrate their life stories comprehensively. So when I say comprehensively, it's not about just about the detailed information. We could see the emotions, we could read the silence, we could read the kind of pain, or unexpressed voice, the muted voice. So we read the silence as well in qualitative research. That is the advantage of conducting qualitative research, because you could understand the silence of it. In other setting, it would have been, I ask a question and the other one doesn't respond, so there is no answers recorded, so it goes blank. But in qualitative research, silence has got volumes to convey. So that is the advantage of applying this method. You could bridge that gap in terms of when you ask the question and when someone says, and then you also could read the body cues. You could read the kind of the facial expressions and the environment, people around you, and the kind of answers they gave. So even if I say that I'm absolutely fine, and when you read my face, you know that no, she is not completely fine, but she is, relating it to in that particular relationship. So she has to say it formally that I'm perfectly fine. But you know that looking at my face, I'm not perfectly fine, but my answer was perfectly fine. This could be interpreted by you if you make use of qualitative research. And my silence could be interpreted. It doesn't mean silence. So there are a number of things, and the intensity and degree of my pain could be read by you when you see my face, when you see how I respond to your questions in terms of my silence. So silence have got lots to say in qualitative. So that is possible to be read. That is possible to be interpreted when you are there physically. So this is one of the advantage of understanding someone's life comprehensively, not just recording the voice as she said that she liked it. But I have to say I like it in the presence of someone who is sponsoring me. I don't like it, but I have to say I like it. I really love it. Doesn't mean I really like the thing, but I'm compelled to say because it is what it has come from the other side, and the presence of the other one, has made me conscious that I need to give the reply. So I give the answer based on that context. So text and context. You have to read me in that context. So I said no, but I like it. So that has to be interpreted by you, making use of qualitative research method. So it's a life stories comprehensively. So you understand at what age, what I did, and why I did, and why I chose that, and why I didn't choose the other one. So that is being, well understood by you. Although I may not reveal every word in the form of these oral interpretations, but you could see from my face in terms of the kind of tears that I shared, the kind of laughter, the kind of joy, the kind of pain that I express in my words. One could understand the true, the genuine, honest, and the original aspect of my life in a very true and very complete sense. Apart from this, we also have the chance of interacting and verifying and getting to know many more details from by arranging called group discussion. This is one of the ways in which we could reach out to the people to gather adequate information and also verify a number of facts that we have gathered from individuals. So group discussion or focus group discussion form an unstructured interview involving multiple participants, allowing for interactive dialogue. In this process, the researcher acts as intervention becomes minimal. The researcher explains at the very outset, instructed the group in terms of what he or she intends to know from them, and what is the kind of the topics or issues we discussed. And so what are the range of things that you would like to know from them? So all these things are being explained, but once they begin the kind of interaction, once they begin the kind of the dialogue, the intervention of researcher becomes minimal. So you become one has to be a good listener, one has to be a very keen observer, and one must be able to record in its own truth. So apart from this, we also have this, there is a possibility of integration with other methods like case study. I talk about understanding the life of the person, a very rich information that one could gather from the chosen respondents for a very specific kind of issues that one wants to know about it. So, and all these are something that we could talk about as the ways in which we could generate a number of data that would enrich or that would help us understand the life story of these people. Remember, in qualitative research method, we don't read individual as individual. We read individual as someone who live in that society. So my answer and my understanding of this data that comes from someone else would be put in a context. Religion that he or she believes in, the polity that they are a part of, or social cultural setting and norms that they are governed by. So the choices that one makes is not a completely independent and free choice. It is based on the kind of network, the kind of relationship the individual establishes with the rest of the community. So the family norms, the neighborhood norms, the community as a broad category, might have a kind of direct, indirect kind of influence. So all these are something that one has to be very careful about when we read individuals and when we try and understand their lives as to what and how exactly could be interpreted. Remember two things. Data collection is one, and which will soon be followed by interpretation. So this has to be compensated in terms of a good understanding, intensive and extensive stay of yours will help bridge those kind of gap between what they live, what they say, and how you interpret. So you have got a number of ways to fill those missing dots, missing links. Since there is a possibility of going to the same place over a period of time. So researchers' presence becomes mandatory. 6 months, 1 year, or 2 years, 3 years, and you come back to your place and you do the kind of write-up and you go back, you stay there. So there are numerous ways in which you could, if the first method doesn't work, you could integrate with other one. Participant doesn't work, the non-participant, you could try with non-participant. Then you have the a number of ways to fill those kind of missing links. Apart from this, you also have the side of group discussion. Then in terms of other than this individual to individual interaction, you also have the possibility of observing them in the kind of say group participation for some events, festivals, rituals, and other the recreational aspects of it. So there are numerous ways to in which one could get the derived advantage of being there. Apart from these advantages and the other benefits that we get it, there are also a number of things that one has to be reminded of, that subjectivity is one, and not to be too overwhelmed and not to be too much immersed, forgetting the role of who we are in that locale. Just to give a brief overview of this on the intellectual underpinning of qualitative research, it's a phenomenological this concept derived from phenomenological reduction, asking for or advocating for bracketing of preconceived notions. So as I said, this approach demands a certain kind of quality, a certain kind of preparedness, as before we enter the social setting called the community that we have chosen to study them. So here, to remove all these to bracket or preconceived notions, whatever we learn or whatever we know about them or whatever knowledge that we have, that we feel we know about them, should not influence our study. So we go with an open mind, for time being, just keep away what we know, as if this is a blank space, and you're ready to receive anything with a fresh mind, to read anything from that environment with a fresh mind. So a blank slate or a blank page is what I could compare in terms of the demand in making use of this method. Bracketing of preconceived notions. Unlearn what you learn for time being, keep aside. And once you have gathered those knowledge, data from them, you can bring back those knowledge and see how much of that has a relevance and how much of that is true, untrue. But for time being, as you study them, even if you have a strong desire to say, this is not good, please don't say that. Because we are not supposed to bring about our own notions about things of life. We're only there to talk about, what do you want to tell us about this life, about this thing, about this event, about these issues? So let them speak from their own, language, speak from their own experience, from their lived experiences, and also let them define that meaning of that in that context. So the context become very important to understand. In my context, it is this, but in their context, it is that. So my research as researchers' idea, researchers' background, researchers' knowledge should not color the reality of the setting. So it demands bracketing of preconceived notions. And it also has this intellectual underpinning demanding of the relevance of symbolic interaction. So I have already explained this. So Herbert Blumer is one of the scholars who talk about this interaction school of thought, and he says that humans act towards things on the basis of the meaning that things have for them. So I will only accept or reject, or I will love or I would value or not value it based on how my family, my society, my community has taught me the meaning of that. If I find that simple walking stick quite valuable, that will be so dear to me. So for you, it is just a kind of stone or a stick, a wooden stick or a cane stick or a simple product. But for me, it becomes very, very meaningful, because that was what the kind of importance or significance of value has come from that particular relationship. My grandfather or my mother has given me on my particular birthday, or so a kind of meaning. So I don't see just that product as product, but I see the meaning of that, the significance of that product, of that particular practices, values, belief, things, by connecting it to the context. So text and context. So as a researcher, I must derive, and I must also read these things from their perspective. It's not from my perspective, but as it has come from the other, from the researchers, from the respondents' perspective, of the meaning that they have derived from the lived experience in that family, in that community. So here, keeping aside, unlearning what we learn, and ready to receive the reality, understand and accept those things that come from the social reality by opening up our minds, and we go with a fresh mind. So now, what is the applicability of this method? Now, it has the capacity to capture the individual life comprehensively. So when I try to understand the life of the person comprehensively, I know what led these things to happen in that way. Why things have happened in that way? So when we talk about research topic, we often see this as a problem, because if things are perfectly fine and if things are in the state of harmony, then there is no need for anything to talk about. When I say that I choose this particular theme, that has a very strong relevance to the kind of family setting, or society, or age group, or educational background, or political participation, that help me understand in terms of, now this is what I like, it means this is a problem. So when I intend to study that problem, I must go with an open mind to read from their perspective. So from my perspective, it is this, but I will just keep silent. I will not just color them, so distort the environment with my thinking. So now how do I do with this? How do I read this? And how do I interpret this? So Max Weber, one of the classical thinkers, have made use of this method called Verstehen. Verstehen in German means to understand. That means interpretative understanding of social action. That is what Weber used in 1947. One must interpret, not translate, but interpret the life of somebody, the response of someone else in their own perspective. So I know that your answer was perfectly fine, but I put you in the context where you gave the answer in the presence of so many people where you should not cry. So you said I was perfectly fine. So I interpret that you have said, yes, you're perfectly fine, but I knew that you were not perfectly fine because your eyes were red, the tears rolled down on your cheeks, and you could not even continue the conversation. That clearly shows that you have not been perfectly fine on that particular situation. So an interpretive understanding of social action would be to put together in terms of describing the particular person in that context by connecting number of things. And the third aspect of how to verify this one could be identifying who could help me understand that, read that reality. Someone says I was perfectly fine, but I don't see you as perfectly fine. But I must keep in touch. My duty is to find out someone in that community who you're very close, who knows you quite well, and who knows your situation on that day. So that could be done by the researcher in terms of, and that could be easily covered by a researcher when you make use of qualitative method. Your physical presence would, ease the kind of a relationship. You can ask the person, you can take the person to a specific, places where you can have a very free and flow, a confidential conversation to help understand that the meaning of what you said. So participant, non-participant, and many other things that you could do it. So a simple word here is our duty as a qualitative researcher is not to document the words literally, but to interpret the meaning of those kind of words and actions in the true context of the people they live. So subjective meaning becomes supreme. So the type of understanding would be direct observational understanding. That means recognizing the subjective meaning of the act through observation, facial expression, anger, participation in various events of life. Then explanatory understanding. So we try to explain all of these actions as to why you do that way by being with them and by us, and then not just by being with them, but we continue to ask, number one, the person who is performing the act and the one who knows the person, and verifying those kind of facts. So these are the ways in which you talk about how rich your explanation would be about the person or the community. So the utmost importance in this method is interpretative understanding. So not just reporting what has come to us from your mouth or from that interaction, but I put that interaction in a context to understand what it means. Then symbolic interaction here in terms of another ways of looking at this is, I think I've already explained this, Howard Blomer, in terms of the meaning that we have and the kind of symbols that we do. Sometimes we don't, often use the kind of complete sentences to explain things, but in society you find certain codes, coded languages, signs, symbols, colors, some sort of actions that we perform. All of these are being read seen as meaningful and carefully interpreted by the researcher. So they focus on understanding how individuals continue to create and interpret meaning through interactions. So this would not have been done that way if the person lives in an isolated land. But our concern is individuals who we talk and who we interact and who becomes a respondent is seen as someone who is in that society. So there is a direct and indirect kind of influence. So we try to create and interpret the meaning of those actions by placing them in those situations. And there is another approach called ethogenic approach, that is, gathering and sequencing of these interlocking acts by individuals to uncover the underlying structures of social life. So there are life episodes. There are a number of things that we do that is being communicated to you by the respondent. And there are missing links. So we try and reconnect. We try and refer to the diaries. We try and refer to recollect the people who we work together, people who know the kind of, who attended the event. So we try and collect all those kind of series of episodes and try to reconstruct and underline the underlying structure of social life and how those events and how those actions give rise to an understanding of a comprehensive understanding of a person's life and the choice that when he or she makes. So the key methodology here is analysis of people's account. This method called qualitative approach focuses on analyzing people's account of their actions within identified settings. So the description and qualitative research is, now what is the purpose of this? It provides detailed description of the social setting. And one of the significance here is attending to mundane details. What we take it for granted is not being seen as insignificant, but we see anything that we do, what we gain in life and what we have, what we commit in life becomes very significant. A simple example is, why do A and B go together for a cup of tea quite often? Why not A and C? And how many times do we comb our hair? So we don't realize this because we do this every day. So it becomes very, very mundane and very, very ordinary. But for someone who is new, that why do you wear this shirt quite often and why not the other? Or why do you like this and not the other? So this kind of qualitative research will enable us to pay attention to such kind of rich and mundane happenings. Everyday behavior is being looked at as very significant because it has, comprehensively, given rise to understanding of your choice, of our chances, privileges, or denied of this kind of chances. So ethnographic study is a very comprehensive school. It helps us understand, it helps us interpret, it helps us connect to the wider social and historical context. So as I said, the strength of this lies in flexibility. And although it has got lack of structure, so flexibility means without a fixed structure. So you go with an open mind, you go with a kind of questions thematically to cover without a kind of rigid norms imposed upon the respondents. And you also have the chance to partake and feel the kind of feelings that the respondents are expressing about. And this theory, now the theory development in qualitative research is inductive, that researchers often formulate and test theories. So it's not mandatory that one has to start from this existing theory. One can formulate and you can test it. And the theoretical insight evolved through this ongoing data analysis, give rise to reflecting the dynamic nature of social phenomena. So you're not having a fixed mind, but you are very open and fresh to receiving any of these significant information flowing into you. So in the process, you can formulate, you can incorporate, and you can align many things that would help in terms of generating adequate data to understand the social life. But there are problems in qualitative research. That means there are challenges. That means understanding social phenomena from the perspective of the subject, because you are all the time focusing on understanding them from the perspective. And so this is one of the key challenges. And many qualitative research studies are based on research on a specific location. So which means to say that it has a single setting. So it will find it very difficult to bring about generalization. So the question of the applicability of this in different settings would be difficult to say, because most of these cases are research demands specific kind of community, specific kind of people, specific age group, and it is quite subjective thing. Therefore, one cannot guarantee the kind of relevance of this is going to be quite sure in terms of the kind of, the similar results that is going to be produced if it is being placed in a different locale. So that cannot be done. So it's quite subjective, it is quite open, it is quite qualitative. So one cannot map it in terms of yes, no, good, bad, right, wrong, because it is in their perspective. So broader generalization becomes difficult, unlike the quantitative research. So the brief strength and weaknesses of this qualitative and quantitative is that in qualitative, it offers a deep and nuanced understanding of the complex phenomena. It is context sensitive, and it can explore new or under-researched topics. And in quantitative, it allows the possibility to generalize it, because you have a large sample data size. Therefore, it is quite possible to represent. And it enables hypothesis testing, and it perceives as more objective and replicable as much as possible. So the importance is given to objectivity, importance is given to replicability. Whereas in qualitative, it's given importance to understanding a deeper understanding and comprehensive understanding of the subjective respondents whom we have studied. So it is not easy to generalize it. It is time intensive. It is very, very expensive in terms, the cost is time, financial, and also the kind of limitation is the skills of the researcher. So it has to be very, very well thought out in terms of who is going to study whom. So researcher and the researched. So, but in the case of quantitative, the limitations would be, since they do not have this physical interaction, not able to have such kind of, proper check in terms of the kind of, double checking of this verification in terms of data, one might miss the context, one might miss the kind of in-depth knowledge about it. There is the risk of oversimplification, because we are thoroughly relying on the data that has come to us. So the assumed variables are measurable and relationships are linear. So we assume that everything can be measurable and all these variables are observable and measurable. So these are the kind of ideas. So last and the final aspect of it is how to identify when to apply each approach is in teaching and research. Who can apply what kind of method? So qualitative can be used when one intends to investigate meanings, beliefs, and experiences. If one intends to explore how and why questions. If one intends to study small, specific, or case studies, and that demands a lot of theoretical framework, an understanding of identity and cultural processes. And how and when to use it, when to use quantitative approach, if we intend to test hypotheses with measurable variables, and when we intend to study the cause and effect relationship, and when one has to cover a very large set of data. So these are the few things we could keep in our mind when we choose what kind of method to use it for what kind of research work. So now what do we take from this session? So what is the way forward after having listened to qualitative and quantitative? So the possibility, and my suggestion is to explore the possibility of using the two methods, qualitative and quantitative, that becomes mixed, and it should be interdisciplinary. Rather than reading and examining or investigating the topic or people, from one lens, the combination of the two would offer both in terms of the kind of intensive and extensive. It also allows for triangulation. That means you get a chance to verify, validate the findings across methods. We can use a survey method, we can use an interview method, we can use observation method, we can use case studies. So all of these will help us, understand the issues and report this kind of data much better in terms of our findings. So the way forward for me as a scholar is to encourage you to make use of these in terms of seeing the two as not set discrete, distinct identity, but in terms of the possible linkage and blending of the two, that would help analyze that things are now, the dots could be linked, and things that you find in terms of the kind of a gap, the kind of obviously nuances could be now better understood. So these are the suggested readings: Bryant, Allen, Creswell, Maxwell, Patton, and Newman. So these are the few readings that I would recommend you to read. And apart from that, you may also read The Field Worker and the Field by edited by Srivastav. There's also the From the Door of His Tent. That is the article. How, what is the role of the researcher in the field while being reminded of a subjective being expected to be objective. So these few readings would help you understand in terms of how important and how one could conduct oneself in the field. So that is all from my side. Thank you so much. And I think I should give you the time to clarify some of your doubts and discuss the
Yes,
research.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So thank you so much, ma'am, for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello,
So dear
ma'am. I
participants,
have a
now
question.
now the floor is open for discussion, and those who want to ask your doubts, you can ask.
Hello.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, good evening, ma'am. My name is Sandeep Sharma. I am a PhD research scholar at JG University, Ahmedabad, Gujarat.
All right.
I have a question here about how can we validate the data that we have collected through the qualitative research? Is there any formal way to validate it?
Right, right. Okay. In terms of this qualitative, as I have discussed, that it is quite subjective.
Right.
And for the validation of this research data that we have gathered, I think the better way to do here is the researchers, deriving or finding out the ways in terms of the data that one receives from the respondent is being subjected to double check in terms of the verification in the field, in terms of someone who is known to them, someone who is has been a part of that kind of association, or even someone who could provide some sort of information, so that there is a kind of that reality expressed in terms of one's person's understanding is being accepted in a setting, if not in terms of the larger kind of social local outside domain, but at least in terms of that setting, one could have the kind of confidence to say that at least that has been done in terms of in the absence of a kind of tools or scientific experimentation that could be carried out, since it is being quite subjective and there is no absolute truth as well. So it can only be seen in terms of, say, the double checking of this in the field itself, in terms of through someone who is known to them by over a period of time.
And ma'am, if my research is a social research and if it is a government project, and based
Okay.
on the output of my research, if
Right.
there is some policy formation that has to be done, in that case, is there a process to standardize my whole way of doing research, or the data that I have collected from let's say interviewing?
All right. Sir, when it comes to understanding someone who is doing a research under an organization,
Right.
or being a recipient of a kind of project from an institute, for example, like ICSSR, or releases funded kind of association, or a kind of independent body, or a freelancer. So these are the other aspects. These are the few aspects that one has to keep a check in terms of who sponsored whom. So I think in the case of although there is an understanding that we follow the kind of research procedure strictly by any researcher who does it, that is what we expect of any researcher. We strictly go by this kind of disciplinary kind of, I would say, the kind of orientation that we get in terms of a scholar as to how we should be behaving in the field, what kind of data to we collect, how honest we should be. Although that is what it has been, but there are also kind of, I think, certain kind of expectations if it is sponsored by a certain organization in terms of revealing, in terms of the final output that one has to, one provides. For example, say you have collected honestly those data from the respondents, and although despite our effort of being quite objective, we are quite, or there are also possibility of degrees of subjectivity. That is one part. But the second part is, no matter how much we try to be objective in the field, there is also a chances of, after having gathered those original, rich, and genuine data, there's also a kind of expectation in terms of the kind of revelation called the final output, the findings, that if it touches the expectations or sentiments, or it becomes sensitive, I think this is one of this the in qualitative, there is a kind of challenges. How do we bravely put all of those in place as revealed by the researcher or the respondent, as honest, as an honest scholar? How brave can we be if the sponsored agency is going to be quite sensitive about what the data has come about? For example, if I am a recipient of a project, and if that intends to bring about, say, there is a great progress, a positive aspects outcome, and if there is nothing of that sort, so how will my final outcome would be in terms of that kind of data to be shown? So here it comes to who sponsored whom, and what is the amount that one has received. All these are a kind of, say, a check in terms of how genuine our works are, and how much have we put in terms of effort that we make in terms of, I think every institution lays down certain kind of guidelines to ensure this. Since the researcher himself or herself is a subjective person, and also the one who is going to analyze it in terms of the sponsors, the one who funded, I don't know how genuine it is. So all of us, what we can only do is we try our best.
Right, ma'am.
So-
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
So the first thing that you should ask is who funded, and how long is the duration of your study, and the amount. These three things are asked for a specific reason, to understand the reliability and validity of a work.
Hello,
Right.
ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes,
Ma'am, myself Shivangi Bhatia.
sure.
I'm talking from Uttarakhand, Rishikesh. Ma'am, I have a question, like what all things we should keep in mind while making a questionnaire for a quantitative research. What are the important key points that we should keep in mind while
All right.
structuring a
All right. If a quantitative demands a lot of data to be gathered, so the data set will be quite large. I would suggest that a review of literature of the recent books, of the recent publications, and also a kind of people who are specialized or expertise in that field are being interacted before you frame your final questions and go to the field, or you send out as questionnaires, because they will first you draft your questions based on your objectives as to what are your key objectives. Then you proceed to read as much as you could in terms of based on the key objectives, what they have your outline. Choose literatures that will help you understand in terms of the concepts, in terms of the kind of variables, in terms of the kind of measurable, observable variables that you could. Also keep in mind the kind of sensitive questions that you use should be like well taken care of. The language, the kind of structuring of the sentences should be simple, clear, and it should not be very sensitive in terms of religion, in terms of gender, in terms of any categories. And moreover, it should be comprehensive. So my suggestion would be to strongly incline into on two sources. Number one is talk to locate this inner available literature. So see and look for all of these good literatures that would help you understand the variables, the concepts, the methodology, the limitations. Second is to talk to someone who is already specialized in this field. So a conversation of, between you and them would help structure. And the third aspect is show to someone else before you send the questionnaire to the respondents, before you send the Google form, before you send it, try out on a pilot scale in terms of few people, just try out and see whether those questions are understandable. Is it sensitive? Is it inadequate? Or is it oversimplified? Or is it also complicated? Or are those languages understandable? So they will suggest. So all those things will have to be tried and tested before you finally send out those questions, because in the case of quantitative, and especially when you deal with a large data set, you will find that not all these sources that you have chosen are reliable. For example, a simple sense is if you rely on the census record, that is the first step to begin with, but we cannot also believe that these data we have received from these different offices are absolutely reliable, or this could be taken as a gospel truth, because we know how much we do it in terms of the kind of data that we have collected. Example, census record every 10th year, we finish within a few months of every family. Every detail required of each family in India is completed within a few months' time. For example, if one has to look at this, we'll have to see that we have to ensure that we get what we intend to get in terms of producing the result. It should be very, very carefully sorted out in terms of the materials, consulting specialists, and also try out on trial basis with few respondents in terms of how well they could provide those informations and what are the gaps. And then having taken care of that, you may proceed with the final one.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, so thank you so much, ma'am, for a beautiful presentation. So dear participants, the time is 8 o'clock. We will wind up for the day 3. Still we have 12 days to go. We have shared the PPTs of presentation as well as YouTube live, as well as the contact details of the resource person for day 3. Meanwhile, if you want to utilize it for the further conferences or workshops or whatever it could be, you can contact our faculty for day 3. Okay? See you all tomorrow. So the event will be starting at right time and it will be ending by right time. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, sir.